Hello. Welcome back. It's Sarah from Roadworthy. I thought I would do a January wrap up. I do not normally do a monthly wrap up, but I know the beginning of the year, there's so much like end of the year content, best of 2023 and, you know, goals for 2024 and, all that stuff going on that I know I personally have had trouble keeping up with people's weekly reads. And so I know I'll end up watching a bunch of monthly wrap-ups. And so I think everybody else is sort of having that same struggle. So I thought it might be kind of nice if I did a monthly wrap-up. So a couple things. I participated in the Past and Future Readathon, and which was fairly successful for me. I actually started my reading in advance in December, so I had a couple books that fulfilled the prompt actually before January 1st. But I read two books this month as part of that readathon. The first was Betty by Tiffany McDaniel, and this was like read a book as part of a series. This is a very loose, this is a little bit of a cheat. This is not really in a series, but there's some overlapping characters with her book, The Summer That Melted Everything. Betty is, this is Tiffany McDaniel's sort of loosely inspired telling of her mother's story. So Tiffany is an indigenous mixed author, and it's about Betty, whose father is Cherokee, mother is white. They have a number of children. I loved this book. It's coming of age, it's family drama, it's small town drama, a lot of trigger warnings in here. It's beautifully written, and the relationship between Betty and her father is wonderful. And yeah, I really loved it. And I loved Tiffany's earlier book too, The Summer That Melted Everything. So I'll definitely pick up more of what she writes. So again, that I read as part of the Past and Future Readathon. The other book that I read as part of that was one of my 5-star reads for the month, The Strangers by Katarina Vermette. Katarina Vermette is a Métis Canadian author, and this is also kind of a loose series. Again, there's overlapping characters with her debut novel, The Break, which I also was like 5-star amazing. This is looking at 3 generations of women in the Stranger family. And just her writing is so, there's a lot of heart-wrenching stuff in here. Stuff with incarceration, teenage pregnancy, there is abuse, foster care system of Indigenous children. There's a lot in here, and it is kind of heavy, but I just think I just thought it was amazing. And there's just a lot about intergenerational trauma and the lives of these women. You can see sort of the echoes of, their experiences and how they keep going forward. I will say it does end, hopefully, like you know, you get the sense that these women are gonna sort of break out of the cycle of poverty, and you know, so I believe there's a third book coming. So again, she's another author that I will pick up probably anything that she writes. So that is what I read for the Past and Future Readathon. Thank you to the hosts, and I will link their channels down below. Yeah, that was great and helped me get through a number of books off of my shelf. So that was fantastic. What else did I read? I read, listened to The End of Drum Time by Hannah Pilvainen. This is a book about Sami reindeer herders back at the time when really Christianity is strongly taking over in Scandinavia. There's just a lot about the disruption of Sami culture. This book kind of gets described as a love story, which I think is a little disingenuous. Yes, there is a love story, but I feel like that love story is, you know, the backdrop of what's happening is far more present. There's a lot about, again, the larger sociopolitical situation in Scandinavia. So again, the borders between Sweden, Finland, Russia, you know, it's all very loosey-goosey up there, and how these decisions made by these countries suddenly trying to enforce their border that's never been enforced before, and how that impacts the Sami who follow the reindeer on their national, you know, their migration routes, which of course don't respect borders. And then you've got Swedish settlers coming in who again are wanting to have farms, and again how that impacts the nomadic Sami people. So again, it's a lot about just the changing culture for these folks. So I enjoyed that book quite a bit. I believe it was long listed for the National Book Award. And so that's what brought that book to my attention. Then also very early in the month, I read Beyond the Door of No Return by David Diop, and that was translated by Sam Taylor. This book is quite different from Diop's International Booker winning book, At Night All Blood is Black. I'm not sure what the title of that book is, but anyway. These books are very different. Diop himself is a professor of French colonial literature, and this book very much sort of smacks of that. This is the main character is a French botanist who goes to Senegal to study the flora and the fauna there. Then this is during the time of the slave trade when Senegal is a French colony. And it's, you know, adventures ensue. There's a lot with storytelling in this book because he's telling the story of his travels in Senegal through journal entries to his daughter. And so, you know, you start to wonder how much of, and then sort of how much of what he's being told is true, how much is what he's sharing with his daughter is actually true. So I enjoyed this book but I was probably disappointed, partly because I thought At Night All Blood is Black was amazing. So I'm probably being unfairly critical of this book. I also read A History of Burning by Janika Oza. This is about 3 generations of an Indian family when they migrate to Uganda. So the patriarch is sent to Uganda. I shouldn't say sent, he's sort of coerced to go to Uganda to build the British railroad to Lake Victoria. So it's sort of the colonial period, then you've got the independence period when Idi Amin throws out all the Indian residents. So then the family goes to Canada. There's other members of their community that go to Britain and, you know, various places around the empire. So it's a lot of family secrets. The past is never really the past. You know, it has ramifications for and how, you know, decisions made by earlier generations, how those impact later generations. I thought this was just a warm, hopeful story. And yeah, I would just put my earphones in and clean and go about my business, and I could, you know, listen to this for hours, literally on some days. So then I read a novella, Earth and Ashes by Atiq Rahimi. I cannot find the translator's name for this book, but Rahimi is a well-respected Afghani author, and this is a very tightly focused story on an older man with his grandson in tow, journeying to find his son, who works in a Russian mine, to let him know that the Russians have bombed their village and his entire family is dead except for his dad and his son. So it's a lot of the grandfather's trauma as he's making this journey, and the grandson is deafened in this blast, so it's, you know, he doesn't understand what's going on. You know, the son that they're traveling to doesn't know what's happened, right? So again, it's a very tightly focused story, and that's a little bit of a challenge for me because I was hoping to get a little bit more of context of what Afghanistan was like in the 80s under the Russians. So in this book really didn't deliver that. Again, this is a very narrow story. I also listened to True Grit by Charles Portis. This is another 5-star for me. Absolutely loved this book. It is just a Western adventure of Maddie hooking up with Rooster to bring the man to justice who killed her father. And it's their adventures seeking him. And Maddie is just a wonderful character. She's, you know, just persistent, smart, sassy. This was just a treasure to listen to. And it is narrated by Donna Tartt. And Donna Tartt does there's an essay by Donna Tartt about the book included in this audiobook. Um, and which is also just delightful. I absolutely loved this, and this was another 5-star read for me. Absolutely pick up True Grit if it's read by Donna Tartt. And then I read, since I was going to Florida to travel, I thought I would read A Furious Sky, The 500-Year History of American Hurricanes by Eric J. Dolan. This is exactly what it says on the tin. This was the history of hurricanes in America. So it goes through the colonial period, right to, present day at the time that the book was written. And I want to say the 2021. This is really from a, white European perspective. So you don't get what hurricanes did, how that impacted indigenous peoples before European colonization. So, and it's a lot about how we came to understand hurricanes, that there's an eye, that the winds go in a circle, how we learn to track them. And then it gets into forecasting and prediction, and that whole history of meteorology. That's the part that I thought was very, very interesting. And then that part of it sort of ends in the 80s. There hasn't been that many breakthroughs in our knowledge of hurricanes since then. And so then it turns into this resuscitation of hurricanes and the damage done and the number of people killed and the amount of damage. And that I thought was much less interesting, and it felt a little creepy reading about, the human interest stories, people recounting their relatives that got swept away in the waters and stuff, Anyway, so that is sort of the part, again, from like Hurricane Andrew, which was in 1992, to Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Katrina, and again, just going through sort of the destruction that has occurred. The epilogue includes information about how hurricanes are being predicted to change with global warming. Much more rainfall, much more frequent, much stronger storms are predicted. And I wish there was a lot more information about that included in this book. Then I read Pedro and Marques Take Stock, a picaresque novel. And this is a Brazilian novel written by José Faleiro, translated by Julia Sanchez. And this is, it is a picaresque. It is these two grocery store clerks who are sort of frustrated with the corruption of Brazil and recognizing that, their relatives were always poor, that no matter how hard they work, they're going to be poor too. And they don't have access to education. They don't have access to connections. So their ability to care for their families is minimal. And so the two of them decide to go into business selling marijuana. And it's, the adventures that ensue, and of course how it sort of goes belly up. This is a short, fun, this was like a perfect vacation read. They are very likable. There's aspects of like buddy, movie here. this was a treat. And then I read The Lonely Passion of Judith Hearne by Brian Moore. This is Brian Moore, who's an Irish author. This is his debut, published in 1955. And this is about Judith Hearne, who is a 40-ish spinster who sort of was once genteel but is now extremely poor. And it's really her unraveling. This is the, you know, sad, desperate, pathetic woman totally unraveling. I will say no more. Absolutely loved this book. And I will absolutely go back and pick up Brian Moore's backlist, because this was like heart-wrenching to read. This was stressful. You know, you could see like the train wrecks coming, you know, and it was just like, Judy, no, oh God, you know, one of those books. So absolutely loved it. And then I read One Foot in Eden by Ron Rash. This is Ron Rash's debut novel, published in 2002. And Ron Rash is a well-known Appalachian writer living in the Western Carolinas. And this is not a mystery, but this is the story of the murder of this Korean War veteran by his next door neighbors, and sort of the ramifications of that. It's a lot of the sins of the father, you know, being visited on the children. There's a lot of biblical imagery in here, and Ron Rash is also known as a poet, and so the writing is just absolutely beautiful. This was just a well-crafted, beautiful book, and I will absolutely be picking up more from Ron Rash. And the last thing, Stone in a Landslide by Maria Barbel, translated from the Catalan by Laura McLaughlin and Paul Mitchell. This is a novella about Concha from when she was a 13-year-old girl to when she's an elderly woman. And she comes from a poor farming family in the Pyrenees, and she is sent, because her family can't really afford to feed her and care for all their children, she is sent to her aunt and uncle's farm because they are unable to have children, and so she's sent to help them out. And so it's her childhood, through, you know, when she falls in love and gets married and has children, through the Spanish Civil War, and what that did to her and her family, and it ends with her living with her son in Barcelona. And so it's a lot about how her life has dramatically changed, and how the Spanish Civil War impacted her personally. But that's also sort of a microcosm of what was happening to Spain in general. So that agrarian, rural, farming life in the Pyrenees, you know, how that basically, you know, is disappearing, and the modernization of Spain. So a great choice for Shorty September if people are starting to collect titles for for that reading event. This would be a good choice. So I read 12 books in total in the month of January, and 4 of them were 5-star reads. That's pretty amazing for me, since I probably give maybe 10 5-stars a year. So this was an absolutely like banger reading month. Great way to start the 2024 reading year. So I'm sure I'm not going to be able to sustain this greatness, but we'll see. Yeah, so I hope other folks had a great January, and I hope February is going well. It's hard to imagine February being this great, but I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. All right. Thanks, everybody, and see you later.